Let's do some Steno coding with JavaScript and React. We're going to recreate the Tic-Tac-Toe application from the React tutorial, and I'm going to do the coding using Plover stenography and Vim snippets. So the game that we're going to reproduce is here, so I can click the squares and it will put in either a X or an O. We've got a status up above that is tracking which player is going to be next. And then when we get to the point where we have a winner, it tells us that we've got a winner here. And on the right, we've got history, and we can go and move back and forward in time with the game state, going all the way back to the start and then all the way back to the end as well at any point in between. So looking at the UI here, the way that I'm thinking of implementing this is starting off with a game component that will wrap the entire application. And then I'll put the status and the squares inside of a board component. We'll give the status itself its own component there, and then each of the squares in the tic-tac-toe game will have its own component. On the right-hand side here, I would like to put all of this inside of a history component, and then essentially have that be a wrapper around a bunch of historical move components there. So that's the way that I'll proceed forward. Now I've used create React app to generate a fresh new React application, but I have removed a bunch of excess files that I don't think that are going to be needed here. So I think we're ready to begin. So let's start off with a litmus test just to make sure that everything is hooked up correctly. So I'll start by here in the default function for app, and I'll return a button. And I'm not going to want an ID for that, but I will have a class name, and I'll make that square, and I'll just put an X in there, and that should probably be it for it. So if we go and have a look at the browser here, I can see that we've got a button with an X in it, so that's great, exactly what we want. The button doesn't currently do anything here, but that's okay. We'll change that eventually. So now that we've got the litmus test done, a good thing to do would be to use Git to commit this change and mark this in our progress. So we'll go back over to the terminal, and let's have a look at the status. Okay, so we've just got a modification to app.js, so let's do a commit all there, and we'll just say that this is the initial code commit. Great. So moving back to the application here, what I want to do now is not change the output of this X button that we've got so far, but I want to go and create the initial components that we need to essentially wrap all of these buttons there. So I want to go and create the game component, the board component, and the square component. So what we'll start with is renaming app here to be game. So in order to do that, let's just go over to index.js here, because it's calling it app there. So what I'll do is I'll say that I want to substitute out app, and I want to substitute it out with game. Okay, great. So that's worked okay, but it's given us an error because because we don't have that game file yet. So we're going to have to rename app.js to game.js. Okay, so that got rid of that error, and we'll just rename this component to be game. Okay. Next, we'll return something a little bit different than just this button here. Let's get rid of all of this, and we'll say that from the game component, I want to return a div with a class name of game. And within that div, I want to render a component. So yeah, we'll render a component, and that component is going to be called the board. And it's not going to take any props for now, and it's also not going to take any children either. So obviously we're going to get an error here because the application doesn't know anything about the board component or file because we haven't created it. So let's go up the top and fix that. So we'll go an import, and we want to import board. Great, and then we haven't created the file yet, so let's go and create a new file, and we'll put it in source board.js. Okay, and within board, what we want to do is a function component declaration. So where are we here? Component, and we'll do define function component. We'll export it, but we won't use the default syntax here. The board doesn't currently take any props, so we'll remove them. And what we want to return is a div, and actually we'll give it a class as well. So a div with a class name of game-board, and within that, we will render out another component, and then that will be the square component. So we'll just say square, and that will take in a prop, and we'll call it the value. And for now, we'll just change that to be the value of a static string of x, much like what we had before with that button there. And of course, doesn't know what square is because we haven't defined it yet. So let's go back up the top, and we will import that in. Firstly, square from square, but we don't have the file yet. So let's create that new file. We'll put that under source square.js, and here we'll do it again with another component function component declaration, and we'll export it, and that will take in a set of props which will destructure value out of it, and what we'll return is that button. So we'll do button with a class name of square, and within that what we want to render is the value that gets passed in. And going back over to the browser, it looks like that we're back to where we were before. So a clickable button that doesn't do anything just yet, but we have all of the intermediary components set up to do most of the rest of the game. So that's great news, and something that we should add to the commit log. So let's go back over to the terminal here. And we'll go, let's have a look at the status. Yep, we've got a bunch of new files here, so let's add them, and we'll commit them with a message of create initial components. Great. Okay, so next what we want to do is to create a set of rows. So currently we've got one square, but we want 3 squares in sets of 3. So 9 squares, 3 rows. So the board should probably be responsible for creating that. So let's go over to the board and do just that. Okay, so first thing we want to do here is to say, all right, I'll create a const, and that will be the rows, and then within that, what I want is a set of rows, a set of squares, each with their own unique square number. So that makes me think that I want a range of 0 to 8 for the 9 squares. So I'll do that in JavaScript by saying I want an array of 9 elements, and I just want their keys there. And since keys returns back an iterator, in order to get this transformed into an array of integers, I need to go and spread this across a new list. Okay, so this is given us our 9-element array with integers 1 to 8 in them. Now, but what I want to do here, though, is in order to get them into rows, I want to chunk them out. I want to take this list and chunk it into 3 separate lists, 3 separate arrays, so that I can display them properly. And JavaScript doesn't have a native way to chunk out lists, so we're going to have to do this ourselves. So what I'm envisioning at this point is that there will be some kind of function called chunks that will take in an array, and it will take in the chunk size. So in this case, I want it to be chunked into 3 separate lists there. And I'm sort of thinking that the chunks function will probably be a generator function. So I'll want to then spread that across a new list, similar to what we did with array 9 keys. So I'll go and highlight all of this, and I'll spread it out across a new list. Okay, so that's it for the rows that I want. So since we haven't defined what the chunks function is yet, of course we've got an error. So let's go and fix that up with a function declaration. I'm not going to export it. We're going to keep that star there because we are creating a generator function, and it's going to be called chunks. And it's going to take in as parameters an array, and then also a chunk size. So where are we here? A chunk size. Okay. So what we want to do is essentially iterate over this array and then yield up a slice of the array of size chunk size. So I'll use a for loop to do that, and I'll do, let I equals 0. I is less than the upper bound, which is the array.length. And we're not going to go iterate over them one by one. We want to iterate instead with I plus equals the chunk size. Okay, and then here what we want to do is to yield up a slice of the array, array.slice, and the index is going to start at I, and it's going to end at I plus the chunk size. Okay, so now that we've done that, we have our rows ready. So we just need to essentially display them. So let's get back up to the game board, and we'll say here that what we want to do is do a render, and we want to render the rows. We're going to map over them. And for the map function, we don't care about the this.arg or this arg there, but we from the rows that we map over, we're going to take each of the rows, and we want to display a div with a class name of where are we? Of board row, and from here, what we want to do is to map over the row. So we want to do another render and say row.map. And here we've got what's going to be yielded up is the square number, the square number. And what we want to do with that square number is render out a square component. But the value that we're going to pass in is going to be the square number itself. The square number. Okay. So it looks like that we now have those 3 sets of 3 rows displayed. So that is nice. But it doesn't quite look the way that the React tutorials Tic-Tac-Toe app looks like. It's plain styling. So let's use this as a good opportunity to go and add some styling to this. So we'll open up the CSS file. We've just got everything inside of the one CSS file for this. And I'll say that, so first of all, I'll do styling for a body tag. And I'll say, all right, I'll give a margin of 5 pixels. And that's going to be on all sides. Next, we want to style a class, which is going to be the square class. And we're going to want to put in a back, where are we? No, that wasn't what I wanted to do. Background. And that's going to be a color, which we're going to do a hex color. And that's going to be FFF, so all white. What we want to do then next is give it a border. And we'll give it a border width first. And that's going to be of 1 pixel. And then we'll give it a border style, which is going to be solid. And we'll give it a color as well, which will make a hex color with, and we'll make that 999 gray. Yep. Next, let's make this float, not throat, but float. We'll make it float left. And we'll give it a font size of 24 pixels, so we'll give it a length here, and that will be of 24 pixels. We'll give it a font weight, and we'll give it a keyword of bold, and we'll put in a height, and that will be a length as well, and that will be 34 pixels. Then we'll give it a line height as well, a line height, and that will also be a length, I think, and that will be also 34 pixels. Next, we'll give it some margins, so we'll say what margin right, and we'll make that a length, and this time it'll be -1 pixels. And we'll do a margin top as well, which will also be a length of -1 pixels. Then what we'll do is we'll get rid of all the padding. So we'll say explicit padding length, and we'll make that 0 pixels. And get rid of all the rest of this here. And then we'll say we want to align the text, so text align. And that's going to be center. And then finally, we're going to put in a width, which is going to be a length, and that's going to be 34 pixels. Okay, so that's looking a little bit better there, but it's not quite displaying in the rows and columns the way that we want to. So let's add some styling to the game class, and we'll say that we want to change the display there, and we'll make it display flex, and we'll say that the display direction should be, or not display direction, I should say, that should be the flex direction. Flex direction should be row. Okay, that is looking a little bit better, although I realized up here this hyphen is a bit too far away. There, that's a bit better. Okay, great. So so we've got our styling back to the way that the tutorials Tic-Tac-Toe has styled it. So let's commit all of this away. Let's see, what have we got here? We've just made some edits, so we'll just say add and git commit all of them with the message of create rows and styles. Okay, great. So next what we want to do is to get some moves on the board. So we don't want to show the square numbers inside of the squares. We want to show whether there is an X or an O in there. And so we want to show that, and we also want to show the, we also want to create some state that will hold the square selection state. So, so let's go and focus on getting some X's on the board. And so we'll go over to the game file and start doing that there. So first of all, what we want to do is decide what state the squares should be held in. What should it be? So I'm thinking that it should be the same as, well, quite similar to what we've done for the rows. So we'll want to have an array of 9 elements there, and since the initial state of the board will be that no one has made any moves, I would fill up the arrays with the array elements in there with just null. Okay, so that's what the initial state should be. So what I'm going to do is leverage React's useState function to, where are we here? useState to hold that state and enable us to set the state as well. So I'm going to call the state the squares, and then from there we've got the setSquares function that we receive back from useState as well. If we save that, we're going to get an error because we currently don't know what useState is. So let's go back up the top here, and we'll import useState. Okay, that's gotten rid of that error. So what we then, so now that we've got our set of squares, what we need to do with it? Well, the board is going to need to know about the squares. So let's pass that in as a prop. We'll say that the board can have that prop of squares equals squares there. Okay. So the board also needs to know what should happen when a move occurs. So we want to basically hand it some kind of function, and we'll call it, say, handle move. And the thing that should happen when a move occurs is we want it to update the game. So we'll say that this is a function, and we'll call it update the game, and within that, we're going to pass in the set square. So the update game function needs to know about the set squares function, so we'll pass that in as a parameter. So yep, we've got an error there because we haven't defined the update game function yet. So let's go and do that now. Down here we'll do function declaration. I'm not going to export it, and we'll call it update game. Update game, and that's going to take the parameters of set squares. And what we need to return from here is returning a function, and that's going to be a function expression. The parameter that we are going to expect to get back, well, when this function is called, is going to be the set of next squares. So like the new state. So we're going to receive these next squares, and then what we want to do is to pass in next squares into the set squares function. So set squares, and we'll pass in next squares. Okay, and so now that we've got the update game function implemented, we now just need to go and pass it into the board. So we'll go prop, and we'll say that the handle move prop is going to contain this handle move function. Okay, great. So now that we've done that, let's go over to the board file and have it receive the handle move function and see what it does with it. We'll move over to the board. It's going to take in props now. Didn't have any before, so we're going to say I want props, and we're going to receive the squares prop and the handle move prop there. Okay, so what we now need to do, well, the first thing that we need to do is now that we have the set of squares down in the square component here, we don't want to have the value be the square number here. We want the value passed through to be the element that is in the squares array at index square number. So we'll just go and change that up, and there we go. So if we save that, so we've got our numbers cleared off of the board for now, but we'll make sure that it can display something soon enough. Okay, so next thing we need to do is to basically give the square the square component a way to handle clicks. So what should it do when a square is clicked? So it should handle click. And what I want to do is to have a function sort of similar to what we did with the game, and just call it update board. Now, within update board, I want to pass in 3 parameters in there. So I want to pass in squares and handle move that we got from the game as essentially context to the function. And then I want to pass in a square number as well. So this value that we've got here, because that's going to be different for every it's going to be different for every square, so we want to be able to pass that in as it occurs here. So I want to pass in squares and handle move now, and then square number later. So we can do that in JavaScript with with some currying, and we'll say bind null here for this argument, and we'll say that there's going to be squares and handle move. And the way that this is going to be handled down in the square component is that we go and add a prop, and we'll call it handle click. And at this point, what we need to do is go and say the handle click here is going to take in an argument, and that is going to be the square number. This is looking a little bit like a long line, so let's just quickly fix this up. We'll format it. Okay, so we passed in squares and handle move at the outset, and then passed in square number later on. And so now let's go and then define that that function there. So the update board function. So we've got we're not going to export that, but we've got our function update board, and it then receives the squares, it receives handle move, and then finally square number. Okay, and then in here what we want to do is return a function, and that will be a function expression. That's not going to require receiving any parameters here, but what we want to do is to essentially put in an X inside of the put an X in the board. So we want to create the new state for the squares. We want to put an X in the square that was clicked, and then we want to pass those new squares, or the next squares, off to the handle move function that we've been given. But before we do that, though, we want to make sure that if there is already an X in that particular square, that we don't do anything. So we'll create a guard clause here that says that if within the squares array at the indice of the index of a square number, if there is something there, then we don't need to do anything, and we just return. And we're not going to require this any else conditions there. Okay, so now for the rest of the function where we've clicked on an empty square. So what we want to then go and do is create a new set of squares. So we'll say that we want const next squares, and we're going to take the current squares that we get passed in, and we're going to slice them. I'm going to get rid of those indexes in here because we want the entire squares. So this is essentially going to perform a copy. And what we then want to do is we want to take within the next squares inside of the index of square number, we want to put in a string, and that's going to be x. So we've allocated x to that new square, and then we just pass off the next squares to handle move. Where are that? That was next squares. Okay. So now that we have done that, let's go and open up the square component, because it's now received this handle click function and needs to do something with it. So let's go over to the square, and it now receives handle click, and what it needs to do here is just quite simply, we'll give it a prop, and we'll say on click, it should handle, well, it should call that handle click function. And I think that should probably be it. Let's go and double check over on our board here. Yep, so as we click, we're getting X's. If we click where there already is an X, nothing happens. So we can just keep on putting X's on this board here, which is a good step forward for the game, and probably a point where we should also check these changes in. So let's do that right now. What's the status look like here? Okay, so it's just additions to these components. So we'll say add square selection. Okay, so it's all well and good to have us be able to put X's in here, but we need to be able to take turns in this game. So let's go and do that. And we're going to have to figure out how we determine the current move, what move we're up to in the game, and how do we determine who should be playing. So let's go up to the game component, and we'll start there. So let's leverage use state again in order to store what move we're on. So we'll say use state, where are we? Use state, and we'll call this the current move. Where are we here? The current move, and the initial current move will set at 0. Okay. So within the handle move function, that is going to have to know about the current move and then how to set the current move. So let's add these in as parameters. So current move, and set current move. And down in the function declaration, we're also going to have to do the same thing. So current move, and set current move. And in here, what we will have to do is, let's see here, after setting the squares with the next squares, we want to set the current move to be the value of the current move plus 1. So we're essentially incrementing it by 1. So we'll do set current move. And that will be, some parameters there, and that will be the current move plus 1. Okay, So now that we've done that, let's figure out what we should do in order to determine who should go next, what player should go next. So we'll move back up to current move here, and we'll say, let's do a const, and we'll call it x is next. So we'll say x is next, and the way that we're going to calculate whether x is next, because there are only ever going to be 2 players, we'll just say that we'll grab the current move, and we'll say if it's modulo, if the current move modulo 2 is equal to 0, then x is next. Okay, great. Now the board itself needs to know whether x is next or not. So let's pass that information in as a prop. So we'll go prop, and we'll say x is next, not net, but next. Okay. This line is also probably looking a little bit long now, so let's just format this. Okay, great. So now that we've passed x is next into the board, let's go and have the board receive it. So we'll open up board file again, and we'll go up to the top, and we'll say that we'll destructure out here x is next. And now that we have it, what we want to do is pass it into the handle click function. So we'll go and down here, and we'll add it just to the end, and we'll say x is next, and then we'll go and put that into the update board function below. So let's go down here, and that will go after the handle move argument. So we want x is next. Okay, so what do we do with x is next here? So we want to go and make a determination on what player should go inside of the next squares array at index square number, depending on that value here. So we're looking here. So this is going to change. So let's go and I'll just remove this for now, because I want to put it inside of an if statement. And I want to say if x is next, then the next square number is going to be x. Otherwise, it is going to be O. So let's do that. We'll just change the value inside of the quotation mark there, and I think that that should be it for at least doing the turn taking. Let's just quickly go and double check. If I click X and then click the next one, yep, looks like it's taking it in turns. So we've got XO, 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 XO. Great, that's exactly what we want. So since we're sort of doing, since we're in taking turns territory, let's go and add in the status component then. So we'll go back to the board, and where are we here? Go back to the board, and then just below the game board div there. So the first thing that we'll do here is we'll say that we want to render a component. So we'll say component, render the component, and that's going to be the status component that gets a prop passed into it, and that's going to be x is next. And it is not going to have any children. So we'll save that. Yep, so we've just made that out of thin air, so we need to actually create it. But before we do that, let's go and import it. So we'll say that we'll import status from the status file, and then from there we'll create a new file. We'll stick it in source/status.js. And then here we'll do a new functional component declaration. Where are we here? So functional component declaration, we will export it, but not default. And it does take in props. We're going to destructure out x is next. There we go. And what we want to return here is a div with a class name of status. Within this, we want to render out the status. And we haven't actually sort of defined that status yet, so that's why we're still getting errors. So let's do that with just a const, and we'll call it status. And that's going to be, the value of it is going to be a string that we're going to interpolate some values in here, and we'll say that the next player is some interpolated value, and that's going to be determined via well, whether x is next or not. So we'll say x is next. Oh, actually, rather than do that, let's say that we want to do this as a ternary, and we'll say that the condition here is x is next. If that is true, then we want to return a string of x. If it is false, we want to return a string of O. Okay, that looks like the status looks like it's at least showing, but let's just add some styling to it. We'll give it a little bit of breathing room at the bottom there. So let's go and quickly open up the CSS file, and then just down the bottom here, we'll say that we'll add in a class of status, and we'll give it a margin bottom of a length of, let's say, 10 pixels. Okay, that looks a little bit better. So let's just quickly go over there, and we'll refresh. So the next player is X, and then O, XO, XO. Great. So that's working the way that that we want. So now it's time to probably do a check-in. So let's go back over to the terminal here, and we'll say that, let's see, the status is, yep, we've got some new files. So we'll just add them in, and then commit them, and we'll say we've added turn taking. Okay, great. So it's all well and good to have turn taking done, but we need to at some point declare a winner, or at least add the ability to calculate a winner. So let's go and do that. And we'll stick all of the rules or the logic related to that in a separate file. So let's just call that the rules file. So we'll create a new file. We'll call it rules. We're not going to have a React component in there, so we'll just call it lowercase rules. And here, first thing we need to do is make a definition of what the winning positions are. So we'll say, I'll put that in a const, let's say. I'm not going to export it, but what we're going to do is call that the winning positions, and this is going to be a list. No, there we go. It's going to be a list, and then in this list we're going to have elements like another list here of, say, 0, 1, and 2, and these represent indices for the board here. So if I have an x at indices 0, 1, and 2, so the square numbers there, then that means that I have 1. So of course there are many different ways to win this game. I'm not going to make you watch me write out a whole bunch of arrays of numbers. That's a little bit boring, so I'm going to cheat a little bit and just go and put them in automatically via a snippet. Winning positions, and there they all are. This is the only time that I'll do this kind of cheat in this demo. Okay, so we've got a bunch of winning positions here. So what we want to do is now create a function that will calculate the winner. So we will export it there, and we'll call it calculate winner. And we'll have the parameters be a set of squares. So what we want to do is we want to iterate over these winning positions here, and we want to see if there is an X or an O in any of these indices here. And if we find that there is, if the same player is in all of those indices there for any winning position, we want to declare them the winner and then return that player. Otherwise, we'll just return a null if we can't find a winner. So we'll do that by starting off with a for loop. So let I equal 0, and the upper bound here is going to be the winning position, positions, and that's going to be dot length. And yep, I++, so iterate each of them one by one. And what we'll do is we'll destructure each of the indices here, ABC, so that's going to be, say for example, 0, 1, 2, and that's going to be from the winning positions at position I here. So we'll do winning positions. That's not what I wanted to do. Winning positions at I, and then we want to do another const here, and we'll just say that we'll call that the player, and we'll just make the player be the squares at position A. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to say that if there is a player in the squares array at the indice of A there, so there is either an X or an O, and that same player is also in the position for B within squares, B, and the player is also equal to the one in C as well. Then we want to return that player, and we don't need that else clause there. So if we end up with we'll end up going through iterating through all of the winning positions and we don't find a winner, then we're going to say that there is no winner and return null. Okay, great. So what we need to do now is go back to the game component and actually start using this this function. So let's go back over to game, and we want to go up to we're probably just above handle move here, and we'll say that okay, we'll do a const, and we'll call it winner, and the result of that is going to be calculate winner, passing in the squares. Of course, we've got a problem there because we haven't imported it yet, so let's quickly go and import that. So we're going to import the calculate winner method from the rules. All right, that's cleared that up for us. And what we then want to do is pass that winner into the board as a prop. So let's go and do that. Prop winner equals that winner. Okay, great. So let's go over to the board component, and it now takes in that that winner prop. And so what do we need to do with this here? Well, we need to pass it into handle click because we don't want anything to happen when a winner has already been declared. So basically, we just need to ignore clicks at that point. So let's just quickly do that. So we'll say X is next, and then in here we'll put in the winner, and then down the bottom here in the function declaration, we'll add winner here. And the only place that we will need the winner is in the guard clause. And we'll say if winner or there is a player in the in that element of the squares array, then return. And so that should be it for the board. But of course, it's not just the board that needs to know about whether there is a winner or not. The status component also needs to know about the winner. So let's go and pass that in there as a prop as well. So we'll go prop, and we'll pass in winner, and then let's go over to the status component and receive that prop. After X is next, and we'll go winner. Now we've currently got status being displayed as defined as a const, so we're going to have to change that into a let because that is a let. There we go, and we're not going to have a value for it for now because it is going to be dependent on the winner. So let's look at that in if statement. So we'll say if there is a winner, then that status should equal a string. We're going to interpolate a value in, and we'll say that should be the winner is some interpolated value, and that is going to be the winner there. Okay. Otherwise, we should make it this status here. Okay. And you can see here that in the game where we did actually have X winning, it's changed the display there. So let's just sanity check this, and we'll just update. So it says next player, okay, next player, and then here, okay, it says that we've got a winner. Even if we click any of the other squares here, it's essentially ignoring those clicks, which is exactly what we want. So that's a good place to make another commit. So let's go back to the terminal and do exactly that. The status that we have here, yep, we've added that new rules file, so we'll add that in, and we'll commit, and we'll say add winner calculation. Okay, so that is the tic-tac-toe game done for the most part, but what we're missing is the history. So we want to be able to add that, and that's going to require changing a bit of code here and changing the way that state is stored in the application. So let's go and do that now, and we'll start off with the game. Let's go back up to the top here, the very the place that we're storing the initial state of the board, of the squares, I should say. So these need to change essentially. So we're not just dealing with one set of squares that we replace every time. We need to keep a track of each set of squares in the history. So this is going to end up changing into history, and so we'll rename that to set history. And it's not just going to be this single array of 9 elements in here. The initial state is going to be an array with this array inside of it, because we're going to be appending new arrays, new sets of squares every time we make a move. So let's just take all of that there, and we'll put it inside of a list there. So that's going to be our initial state. So next, what we need to do is we need to go and let's see, change the references here for history. Actually, we'll do that in just a moment. But first of all, let's go and create a new const here. And we'll call it current squares. Current squares. And we'll make the current squares will be the history. Be looking at the history array, and whatever the history is at the current move, because we can move backwards and forwards in time in that history there. So we want to take the history at that state in time. So having that current squares const there is what we're going to replace here with calculating the winner. So we don't have the squares there anymore because that's now changed the history. So we need to change this to be the winner, calculating the winner based off of the current squares. Okay. Also, we need to update the update game function here, and so we don't have a set squares function anymore. So that now needs to be set history. The update game function is also going to have to know about the history itself state. So let's pass that in as the first parameter. And it is, yep, we're still going to need to know about the current move and set current move, so that's all fine. Let's now go down to the update game definition here and update this. So this needs to have history and also set history. Okay. So we've done that, but we're also going to have to change what we've got inside of this function here. So we don't have the set squares anymore. So what we want to do is change this to set history. And we don't want the next squares here, but we're probably going to have to change this also to something called next history. So what is this next history going to be? So let's sort of define that here. We'll say next history, and that needs to be, we need to take a slice of the history and at wherever the current move is, and then append whatever those next squares are to it. So so let's do that. We'll say take the where are we? We want the history. We'll take a slice that's going to start at index 0 and it's going to end at wherever the current move is, +1 because indexes, and so that will be the that will essentially be the current history here. And what we want to do is add this in to, or sorry, not add this, add the next squares onto the end of this slice of history. So let's go and move back here, and we'll put that into a new list, spread each of those elements out across it, and then add on the tail here the next squares. Okay, so then once we've got that next history, we set the history with the next history, and then we also need to set the current move, but this is going to be not the current move +1 anymore, because the moves aren't just going to increment 1 in one direction. They can go backwards and forwards in time, so we're going to have to basically take the next history, dot length, and then -1. -1 is where we want to set that current move to. Okay, so here, is this error still right? Yeah, it seems to be. Looks like I've still got a reference to squares here. Yes, of course. All right, so in the squares section here, of course, we don't have that anymore. So when the squares that we pass into the board are going to not be the squares, but be the current squares. All right, that's gotten rid of that error, so that's good. So hopefully at this point we should be back to sort of where we were before. So yeah, that's looking okay. Yep, all right. So the game is back to a working state, but we still need to put in history on the right-hand side. So let's do that by creating a history component. So we'll go back to the terminal here, and let's go and say we'll put that below the board, and I'll say I want to render out a component, and we'll call that history, and it's going to receive a prop of history, which is the history that we get from use state. And then we also want to hand it the set current move function. So we'll just we'll hand it in there just directly. Set current move. Okay. Oh, actually, and we don't require any children there either. Oops, there we go. Right, and let's just we'll clean up this line here as well. Format it. Okay, so we've got history and then set current move. Of course, we've got errors still at the moment because we don't know what history is. So let's go back up the top here, and we'll say I want to import let's go back. That needs to be, no, let's try that again. Import, and that needs to be history. And now let's create a new file with history. So a new file, put that in source, and history.js, great. And then in the history, what we want to do is to do a component, and we'll define a function component. We are going to export it. It is going to take in props, and those props are going to be that history prop, and also the set current move prop. And what we want it to return is a div with a class name of, let's say, game history. And inside of this, we want to have an ordered list. And yeah, we want that multi-line. Not going to worry about IDs and class names. But within the ordered list, we want to render the history, but we're going to map over them and turn them into a bunch of historical move components. So we'll do map, get rid of this arg here. Now within the history here, we do have, I guess, move information in there, but we're not going to use it. So we'll just give that a prefix and underscore there, saying we're not going to use it. And but what we do want from this is the move index, and we're going to end up passing that. Oops. That off to the historical move component. So we'll say here I want to render a component. I'm going to call it historical move. It is going to take in a prop and it's going to be the move index, and then it also is going to require another prop for handling clicks. So we'll just say that the way that it needs to handle a click is just to have a function call in here. Takes no parameters, and what's going to happen here is we'll say that it is we'll call set current move, and then within that we'll say that we want to pass in that move index. Okay, that is looking a little bit long, so let's just do a format there. Okay, that's looking all right. And then, of course, we still have issues because we don't know what the historical move is. So let's do a quick import here. Historical move from historical move. Great, and then let's do a new file. We're going to put that in source / historical move, and then in here we're going to want to create a functional component. So let's do that. Where are we here? So component, and I want to define a function component. We will export it, called historical moves. It's going to have props, and it's going to have that move index and the handle click. And what we want to return is a list item, and I'm not going to care about ID and class name here, but we are going to want to give it a prop of key, so that we can help React sort of register the changes, and we'll give it we'll keep track of the changes, I should say, and we'll give it the move index as the key. And then within within the list item, we're going to have a button. And that's also going to be multi-line. We don't really care about ID and classes here, but we do need to give it a prop, a very important prop of what it should do on click, and we want it to call that handle click function. And then within the button, we want to render out, let's say, a description. So we'll say a description there. We haven't actually defined that yet, so we're still going to be have errors. So let's go and define that here. I'll say let description, and I won't give it a value now because it is going to be dependent on the move index. And the way that it is going to be dependent is we're going to say that if the move index if it is more than 0, then the description is going to equal a string. And we're going to interpolate some information in there, and we're going to say we want to go to move number, and then some interpolated value that will probably be the move index. So where are we? So interpolate the move index. Okay, semicolon. And then, or otherwise, if the move index is 0, I guess, then the description is going to equal another string here, but this is going to be a static string that will just say go to game start. And final semicolon there. Let's see here. Illegal constructor. What have I done there? Is there a problem here, or is that just React being silly? Maybe it was just React being silly. Don't really know. But okay. We'll go back here. Let's just refresh everything here. And yeah, before we just go and test this, let's quickly go and add some styles quickly to the game history. So we want to add class name of game history, and we're going to want to give it a margin left of a length of let's say 20 pixels. Okay, so back here, let's see what happens. So we can, as we click through, we're getting all of these historical move items showing up. Great, we've declared a winner. Can we go back in time? Yeah, it looks like we can, all the way back to the start and to the end again. So yeah, it looks like the game here is feature complete. So let's now go and quickly check all of that in. So we'll say, what's our current status? All right, so we need to add a couple of files because we've got historical move in history in there, and git commit with a message of add history. And there you have it. That has been a re-implementation of the Tic-Tac-Toe application from React's tutorial using Plover stenography and Vim snippets. Thanks very much.